And welcome back to the show this morning, 6:34 on your drive to work as we kind of get this Monday underway. By the way, spring break.
Yes.
Well, I was getting up this morning at, the alarm goes off at 3:30.
Zero dark 30.
Exactly. By the way, that whole daylight savings time.
It's a scam.
Do you know that that strokes rise by 8% today?
Mm-hmm. Oh, and this is officially Grumpy Monday.
No doubt.
Yeah.
I'm grumpy. But, yeah, apparently strokes go up by 8% on the Monday following when we, move up the time clock for daylight savings time.
I hate it.
I know, because, I realized going to bed last night, I was like, man, I just lost an hour, and I've got to get up at 3:30. So, anyway, so I get up this morning, I'm getting dressed, and my kid's stuff is, laying all over the kitchen because we're in this apartment.
Right.
And I realized that they're off this week.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I got to thinking on the way to work. I'm like, this is why. We talked about this last week. We rank like 22nd in the world in terms of our educational system. And this is why. They go to school for like 2.5 months and they need a break. What? Their brains are overloaded?
Please.
And then they go for school for another couple of months and then they're out for 3 months. I was like, if we actually sent them to school like we have to work, we'd have brilliantly educated children.
And they'd be out in 3 years.
And they'd be out in 3 years. And now we're talking about adding a 13th year to high school.
Yeah.
I told my son that this weekend. So he's 18. He's getting ready to graduate in June. I said, I've got bad news for you, buddy. He's like, what's that? I said, well, they've decided to add a 13th year to school. So you're going to actually have one more year to go. He's like, what? I was like, yeah, it's. I'm sorry, man. It's just, they don't think you're quite prepared to go out into the real world and, join the workforce or go to college. They haven't educated. Well, it's not my problem. They don't educate me. I go to school and they don't teach me anything all day. And I'm like, well, see, that's why you have to have a 13th year. So he was completely, and my wife is like bawling. She's in the background cracking up. But he was so upset that he was going to have to go for another year of high school because he's trying to get out. He wants to go to Germany like ASAP. Right?
It's not fair.
I know it's not. Damn it. But this is the thing, by the way. This was a bill that was actually proposed last week. We talked about it on the show, is that, our kids they're going to college unprepared. They have a reading level of basically the 8th grade.
If that,
in many cases.
Can't write their way out of a paper bag.
I was watching the show. So we were watching the show last night on Amazon Prime called "The Marvelous Miss Maisel," and it's about this. Okay, so it's won a bunch of awards and stuff. So we were watching this, and it's interesting. It's set back in the 50s, and so there's all this. If you actually when you're watching the show, it actually is structured like almost like a Broadway play.
Right.
How the commentary goes and how they act and stuff, but. It's actually pretty interesting. It's about a woman. She gets her husband leaves her for his secretary, and she goes out to start being a comedian. And it's all kind of an accident in the beginning, and then it just kind of goes on from there. But what was interesting is she goes in to do. She needs to get a job, right? So she goes in. Have you seen the show?
Yes.
Because you're nodding your head.
Yes.
Okay. So she goes into a department store to get a job, and there's all these. It's almost Christmas time. There's all these Santas, that are out in the hallway trying out to be Santa Claus for the store. But she goes in and she hands the guy the resume. She wants to be an elevator operator. Now, this is back in the 50s where they have these guys in department stores in suits. Man, what a boring job that was.
I know.
Right? But they actually paid guys in a suit to push the button. Right? Oh, ma'am, what floor you'd like to go to? 3rd floor, please. Push
because people couldn't pick the button themselves.
I guess not, right? But this was the guy's job. They had these guys standing in an elevator all day long. And like the one guy she's talking to, he'd been doing it for 16 years. I would shoot myself. Can you imagine the guy goes home and he says, and his wife says, honey, how was your day? My finger is killing me all day long. This one finger is bigger than all other 9. It's because it works out all day. Anyway, But so she hands the guy the resume. It's handwritten, and she says, "I even write in cursive." Pretty impressive back then, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's very impressive. She has a college degree, whole 9 yards. So anyway, the point is now coming back to our kids. My kids can't write cursive. They have no idea how to write cursive, nor can they read cursive. They can barely print. And here's what's even more interesting. The whole world is now going to typing, right? I mean, we type everything on the computer. You know how many of my kids have had a typing class? None.
Really?
They don't even teach typing
They
anymore.
can't keyboard?
Oh no, my son is the oldest, 18.
Yeah.
I've taught my other two kids how to actually type using all their fingers.
Yes.
But the oldest, he's a hunt and pecker. He's fast. He's fast with two fingers, but he types with two fingers.
Well, all they do anymore is on thumbs.
And exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the interesting thing is that, you know, when I was growing up, I had to take a typing class.
I did.
Yeah, I think
Sophomore year, best class I ever took.
Exactly.
Seriously.
Everybody had to take one. We had to take a typing class. You generally had to take language. One or the other. Yeah. So, but it's interesting is that now they don't have to take typing, but we're moving into a world where all you do is type, right? You're either texting or typing, and now we wonder why everybody's going to, you know, ICYMI. What the heck? What? I caught an episode of Bill Maher over the weekend. I was flipping channels.
I'm sorry.
And I know, right? But I had to stop and listen to it because they had. So they remember the Democrat. The guy's name escapes me. He was in. I'll think of it in a second. I'll think of his name. But anyway, he was on there talking about this whole left movement and Trump and AOC and all this. And so there was one of the other female commentators on there, and she goes, "Yeah, we just don't DGAF anymore." And Bill Maher had to ask her what DGAF meant. I'm not going to tell you on the radio because I can't. But this is the whole point is that we don't even talk in sentences anymore. We now just talk in text lingo. So, and I told you the other day is that the new generation, Gen Z coming up, they're all using Instagram as their new way. I'm telling you, we're moving back to hieroglyphics.
Yep.
This is all there is to it.
The emoji bet.
Exactly. So 13th year of high school, we may need like 20 years of high school before people are actually prepared.
It's the dumbing down of America. It is.
Well, how do you control a population?
Make them stupid.
There you go. I actually wrote this in my article today is that one of my closing sentences is this is why in Rome, when, you know, at the latter stages of the empire, right, where and again, when you take a look at Rome, or you actually take a look at France, Germany, you take a look at England, Greece, throughout history, all the empires in the world have all ended the same way. Rome was always a very interesting case in particular because it tracks a lot of what is happening currently in the U.S. because, you know, when Rome was in its early days, everybody contributed to the empire and it grew and expanded. But as the empire gained more wealth, emperors were elected and the wealth shifted to the upper class of the politicians. And when the wealth was not enough to sustain the empire, they started reducing the amount of silver that was actually in the coin. So they debased their currency in order to continue to spend and expand their empire. And of course, as Rome expanded, they expanded past the capacity of being able to support it. At the same time, you had this massive concentration of wealth at the upper end. So, of course, what happens when you get there is that you get a lot of, well, grievances and disappointment by the masses who are the ones that are doing all the production. So Rome's idea to fix this was bread and circuses. You'd show up to the games where they had the gladiators battle each other, gave them sport, kept them entertained, and you gave them free bread. And so by giving them bread and circuses, it kept the masses happy, at least for the moment, because they were getting something from the government. But again, as you take a look, and this is what we're talking about today in the article on the website, which is that when you take a government and you begin to use the government to fund expansion and growth and in using debts and debasing your currency in order to create what they call theoretical prosperity, the issue ultimately is that you get an overwhelming unhappiness within the breadth of the economy. And that leads to changes in the political regime as you move forward. And when we come back from the break, there's an interesting comment about this because there were 2 polls out. I didn't get to this on Friday last week, but there were 2 polls out last week that surveyed the voter intentions of Americans. Absolutely fascinating what people are looking at. We'll be right back after the break. I'll tell you all about it.
South of the river, you stop and you hold everything. A band is blowing Dixie, double 4 time. You feel alright when you hear that music ring.
Catch Lance Roberts' podcast later at lancerobertsshow.com.